Okay, so welcome to Group Somatic Yoga Movement Exploration. I'm Per. Today is February the 9th. Wow, time flies. So today we're going to continue some of the work that we did from the previous session, where we were specifically moving from the upper body emphasis to a lower body emphasis. We did a fair amount of work with the lower parts of the body, but we didn't quite get to the feet, which had been my intention. So today we're going to flip the paradigm a little bit, and we'll do quite a bit of work with the feet. But I want you to, in particular, notice how working with your feet affects your ankles, affects your lower leg bones, affects your knees, affects your upper leg bones, and obviously comes into your hips and pelvis as well as your lower back, for that matter. In fact, one of the sequences that I'm stealing today from one of my somatic colleagues in Dublin, I believe is where Colm is from. Colm McDonald is a somatic educator out of Dublin, Ireland. His sequence that he crafted actually uses the feet and the hips to have an impact on the neck. So we'll play with that and see what it's like for you today. But for now, let's start by giving you a attunement. So when you're ready, find your way onto the floor. If it feels comfortable for you, you could allow your arms and legs to extend. I'd like to give you a visual image to play with and see what it inspires in your soma. So I had some good friends in town recently, and as most of you know, the last week, the airports across the country were just mind-boggling, slowed down by storms. And of course, my friends trying to get here struggled with all of that. And I kept thinking about my own experience in airports. I'm not a easy traveler by any stretch of the imagination. Traveling does not come naturally to me. I'm a destination kind of guy. So I thought it might make a good kind of metaphor for the body, a somatic airport preparation. So imagine in this moment that you're going to unpack your clothing. Notice how the clothing you're wearing right in this moment holds you. Does it hold you tightly and restrict you somewhere or somewheres? Does your clothing feel loose? Is it providing enough warmth as well? And if you can, for right now, don't worry about changing anything that you're noticing. If you can, just be with this experience. And if you've ever had to take a flight somewhere and you were rushing with your body to get to that gate, you know, it's always a scenario where you need to get to gate Z35, right? And you've got 5 minutes to get to your gate before the plane takes off. Imagine what word comes to mind if you've ever had that kind of experience. And most of us in the modern world have had a similarly oriented experience at least once, right? Rushing to get someplace. If it wasn't a plane, maybe it was to the office or get home or some other place. What one word kind of expresses what that felt like in your body, rushing to get to your gate? In order to get to that final destination point, your vacation spot. When you've got that word and it's in your mind or on the tip of your tongue, notice where in your body you feel the word. Is there a particular point in your body where you feel the word? Maybe it's your throat or your chest or your belly or some other point. Feel that spot, feel the word, and notice, does that body spot feel open or closed? So when most of us are taking our flights, right, we're somewhat perhaps like me. I just want to get to the destination. I don't want to be bothered with packing my luggage. I don't want to be bothered with all of the little intricacies and nuances that are required, like, planning for the vacation and making sure I know which gate to go to, all of those details that are required to get to the vacation. We just want to be there. Now I want you to actually let go of your word, soften the body part in whatever way you need to. And instead of going through all the travel drama that left your body feeling perhaps out of sorts, instead feel as if you're at your destination in your body. Feel as if you're on a warm beach, literally laying in warm sand. And notice how your skin feels. If you were laying in warm beach sand, listening to the waves of the ocean, perhaps. And notice how that feels for a moment. And from this more open, spacious place, we'll begin the movement phase of the experience for today. So now would you take your time, please, and roll over onto your belly. And once you're in the prone position, we'll do a little bit of footwork, and then we'll combine it with the cat stretch series that we do. So face down, belly down with legs extended, and configure your face, your head, your neck, and your arms in a way that feels supportive for you. So, for example, for right now, you could turn your head to one side or the other and use the same side arm arm that you've turned your face to support your cheek so that your neck feels more comfortable in the belly down position. The other arm could rest down alongside your torso if you'd like. And we'll begin the work right off the bat with the toes and the feet. And this is a movement we've done before in these sessions. So I'll just go through the sequence a few times and invite you to try it about 6 times today. It'll be our number, 6 to 7 times. So chances are that when you came to the belly down position with your legs straight, the tops of your feet are angled into the floor or into whatever you're resting on. And this means that your toes and your toenails are pointing down away from your body, and your toenails are probably flush with the floor or flush with whatever you're resting on. This is called plantar flexion. The soles of your feet are curled. Take your time and just slowly move towards dorsum flexion, dorsiflexion. So slide your toenails up towards your ankle, up towards your shins. And as you do that, the bottoms of your feet, the soles of the feet that were all crinkly before, will begin to smooth out, especially as you take your toes and tuck them under. You'll notice that you'll have an arch in your feet. The 3 primary arches come into play in the dorsiflexed position. And when you come as far into dorsiflexion as is comfortable for you, your heels now are pressing away from your hips, away from your body, rather than your toes. So reverse direction, slide slowly across the surface of the floor or whatever you're resting on until the tops of your feet, again, naturally uncurl. And then the tops of your feet gradually slide into the floor, coming flatter and flatter. So that's one set. Do 5, 6 more at your own pace. Noticing how your calf muscles respond and how the front of your shins respond. What are your kneecaps doing to make this journey? And wherever you are now in the belly down position, moving into plantar and dorsiflexion through the feet, through the ankles, go ahead and come to a position of ease now, whatever feels good for you and your feet and your ankles. And now let's change up. If you turn your head to one side, would you please turn your head now to the opposite side? And we're going to move into the cat stretch from this position. So using the same side, if your nose is turned to the left, you'd use your left arm. If your nose is turned to the right, you'd use your right arm. Bring your hand underneath, the back of your hand underneath the opposite side cheek of your hand. So again, if it were your left hand supporting the weight of your head, your left hand would support your right cheek, or your right hand would support your left cheek, whichever side you switched to is the one you're on. And your elbow is out to the side, right? Your elbow would be out to the side. From that position, and again, this is one we've done before, it's a diagonal contraction. Let your elbow, your arm, and your head and neck lift away from the floor. And then lift the opposite leg. So again, if you're lifting your right arm, you're lifting your left leg. And then release back to the floor. Turn your head in the opposite direction. Let your other arm come up to support your opposite cheek. And again, lift your arm, lift your head, lift the opposite leg away from the floor. And then release. Now, try that about 5 more times from one side to the other. Remember, we're doing this from the belly down position, if possible. And just keep alternating. This is the classic way of doing this movement in the Hanna Somatic tradition. In a moment, we're going to try a variation that I've been playing with. So would you please do one more set to the right and then to the left. And when you release, then for ease of direction, let's just switch to the right hand supporting your left cheek. Turn your nose to the right and let your left arm come all the way down to your side. Now, this time, instead of lifting the legs the way we did in the traditional version, we're going to work with the foot dorsi and plantar flexion piece that we did earlier, right? So let's try combining the lift with dorsiflexion and then the release with plantar flexion. And if you can't remember all of that, I'll try to make it easy. When the front of your ankles are contracted, your lower back is contracted. So try this. Inhale here, slide your toes under, that's dorsiflexion, and your heels will slide away from you. Stay there, and now slowly lift and turn slightly to the right. Lift your upper torso, turn your right elbow slightly back, turn your head slightly back. Now, when you release, you're going to release your head, release your arm, and slide your feet out to plantar flexion at the same time. So let your upper torso slowly come back down. Let the front of your ankles, the front of your shins release and slide the toenails back to the floor. Let's just do that same side about 5 more times. The toes curl under as you come up with your arm, with your head, with your neck, and look over your right elbow. And then as you release back down, slide the tops of your shins, the front of your feet, flat once again. How does this movement feel in relationship to anything else we've done up to this point? So just notice how it's working for you. And when you feel complete and ready, you'd like to switch and move on to the other side. So you can let your right arm slide all the way down to your side and bring your left hand underneath your right cheek. Turn your nose towards your left. And when you're ready, feel free to curl your toes under as you lift your upper torso. And then release the tops of your feet as you slide your upper torso back to the floor. Is it easy here to curl and uncurl your feet as you lift your upper torso? Or is it really difficult now to unglue a pattern that you've already learned? The lifting of a leg, for example, the lifting of the opposite leg, to be specific. One of the great things about having such a big brain is that we have so many more opportunities to play with patterns, right? This is something that does make humans and other big brain mammals a little distinct. Wherever you are, when you're ready and you feel complete, let's get you off your belly. Take your time, there's no rush. But when you're complete, roll back over onto your back. This might be a good moment as well to grab your pillows that I mentioned before we started the session, right? So those pillows would come in handy here. And we're going to move to a bent leg position. So let your legs bend and then take the pillows and bring them to the outside edges of your, somewhere around, say, for example, your outer hip, the midline of your thigh, or the outer knee. You'll have to kind of play with it a bit in order to determine what's the best location for you to bring the soles of your feet together and let your knees butterfly out to the sides. So I'll give you a moment here to play with that, and I'll even, for camera purposes, demo this myself a little bit. So if I come into what's typically called Baddha Konasana in yoga, and I wanted to support my hips and my legs being a little more restful, I could take them and kind of wedge them underneath where my thigh and my buttock come together. And that makes it a little easier to just let my legs rest in this open position with the inner border of my feet making contact with each other. Some people might prefer, if you had a bigger pillow or you wanted more support, you can bring the support down and even bring it underneath the midline of your thigh or the outer edge of your thigh, depending on what feels good for you and doesn't feel like it's stretching in particular. That's one of the things we want to avoid. So once you're in position, your legs are butterflied, Try letting the hands find their way to the inside edge of your thighs. It doesn't have to, there's no specific spot for this, right? So find a comfortable spot that you can hold and just sense with your fingers, the flat of your fingers or the flat of your palm, the tissue there. And then feel the soles of your feet. Feel the soles of your feet. So we've done foot inversion and foot eversion before, and this is really just a variation on some of those things, right? So I'm going to language it less technically to the best of my ability, just to make it easy. Try feeling the big toe sides of your feet together, the big toe of your right foot, your left foot, just behind the ball of the big toe. And then you notice there's that part of the foot where the inner arch begins to widen out. And there's a little bit of space between your feet, typically there, until you get all the way back to the heels. And then the space diminishes and the heels touch, or they may touch. Notice the situation for you. Everyone's a little bit different, depending on your ankles, depending on what you do with your legs, of course. And then what I'd like you to think about doing is moving the inner border of your feet together so that if they didn't touch completely, the big toes touched, but the inner arch didn't touch, now the inner arch comes together. It's like your feet are a book, in other words, right? And you're beginning to close the book. And notice what your legs do, right? There'll be a little bit of movement from your legs, but think about generating the movement from your feet first, and then slowly diminish the movement and work your way the other direction. So it doesn't have to be big to be effective. Let it come from the ankles and spill up into the pelvis, into the legs. And try that a few times. And with your hands, you might even be able to tell, am I moving from my feet first or am I moving from my legs first? So notice what you're doing and how you're going about doing it. And the next time you release or begin to gradually turn down the contractions that are causing the inner border of the feet to come together, then let's try it the other way. So feel the pinky toe sides of your feet. Hopefully they're together. And then there's an arch here as well. It's a little harder for some of us to feel the outer lateral arch of the foot. That is typically closer together than what you found in the medial arch of the foot, right? The big arch, the one that we often think of when we think of the arch of the foot. So across the foot to the outside edge, there's an arch there as well. Notice how that arch stays closer together from one foot to the other, and then trails all the way back to the outer heels of your feet, which are together. So the movement here is probably going to be smaller necessarily. Think of closing off even more. So press the pinky toe sides of your feet gently together. Notice the muscles that gave you that contraction and slowly turn down the contraction till you get to what feels like zero. Till it feels like there's no contraction left. Pause for a second and then try it again. With your hands, record the response in your thighs, in your pelvis. Where do your knees move now compared to the earlier version? Where do you feel the contraction in your forelegs, in your calves? Is it in the inside of the calves, the outside edge of the calves? Is it the front of your shins or the backs of your calves? On your next release, go ahead and slowly slide your legs towards straight. If you've got padding underneath the outside edge of the hips, you might want to take it out just so that your legs can really rest into gravity for a moment. And notice now, how are your lower limbs in particular showing up with the floor? Do they feel heavy in specific locations or warmer in specific locations? Does one side feel remarkably heavier than the other or warmer than the other? Just noticing. And as we prepare to move on to the next sequence, again, some of these are movements we've done before, but I'm adding some twist to them, some variations to them to particularly focus on the feet and to spice it up a little bit, right? So this is the downhill skiing movement that we've done previous with a emphasis on foot movement, on movement from the ankle and movement from the foot in particular. So when you're ready, please bend both of your legs again at the knees. Bring the soles of your feet flat this time. And for this one, my experience is you want your inner knees to actually touch, right? You want your inner ankles to actually touch. So one thing that you could do, if you find that for whatever reason that's not comfortable for you, you could take um, your little pillows that we were working with earlier and bring the pillows between your inner knees and between your inner ankles so that you've got something to gently squeeze towards the midline with. That would be one option, right? It's just one option. It's not the only one. And it's not something you have to do to get this to work. But it's one way to think about it, right? Now, once you've got your inner knees together, the inner ankle bones together, take a moment to hear from this place to actually let your legs roll gently in slow motion, slightly, like 20 degrees at the most, over to your left side. And then rock back to center. And try that a few times. Begin to establish the felt sense that as you rock your legs over to the side, your right foot gets lighter by necessity. The right foot picks up and probably even comes off the floor. Your left foot bears the weight. And in fact, as you shift to the left, the lateral border of your left foot is what bears the weight. Even the big toe side and the inner heel side of your left foot probably could pick up a little bit. So try that. Rock to the left, Your right foot comes up. The inner arch of your left foot comes up. And then rock slowly back to center. Wonderful. Let's add one more piece to this, which is using your left hand, your left arm, and to some degree, probably your left shoulder a little bit. So the next time your legs are centered, bring your left hand to the left side of your abdomen. And then as your legs rock left, slide left hand right. Slide over to the right side of your belly and then down toward your right outer hip. And then rock back to center. The knees come up. The left hand slides back to its left side. And try that a couple of times just to notice how it feels. What's the temperature of the left side of your belly, of the right side of your belly, of your right hip? What's the texture of the fabric of your clothing? Is it loose? Is it tight? Let's go a little further if we can, right? So as you slide your legs leftward, slide your left arm not only rightward and downward, but maybe down the outseam side of your right thigh. So slide the left hand over to the right side of the belly, down to the right hip, and down the right side of the thigh. Maybe you can get the left hand towards your left hand towards your outer right knee. And then reverse the steps that got you there. As your left hand slides back up, your knees come up. Finish and repeat. Last set with no rush. Okay, when you come back to center the next time, the last piece here is to play again with foot movement and notice how your feet change the realities in your legs, in your hips, in your pelvis, perhaps in your lower back. So your left hand will be used as a kind of barometer here on maybe the outside edge of your right knee or the outside edge of your right thigh, wherever you can comfortably reach, right? Tilt your legs towards the left, but not all the way. Just come over to a spot where, again, your right foot is all the way off the floor and the lateral border of your left foot is where the weight is. Hold there with your legs. Let your left hand register what you're doing with your feet. And now from this position, feel the big toe sides of both feet here. Like we did earlier when your feet were in the butterfly position, Baddha Konasana. Take the big toe and the inner heels and press them down and away. And then relax. You imagine that there was a whirlpool, right, circling from maybe somewhere between the inner feet, the inner knees, the inner thighs, the inside of your legs, the inner border of your feet gets pulled gently down and in, and then slowly releases. And notice with your left hand, perhaps, what's happening in your legs, in your hips as a result of that movement. And do that a few times to get the felt sense for it. And then change the directions. And instead of the inner borders of your feet being sucked down, let the outer borders of both feet be sucked down. And let your left hand notice the effects of that movement. Now come back to center with your legs and slide your legs to straight. Relax your arms. Take a well-deserved rest, especially in the toes and the feet and the ankles. Notice how one leg feels compared to the other, how one foot feels compared to the other. Let's try that whole sequence to the other side. So when you're ready, rebend both of your legs. We'll bring the elements into play sequentially as we did on the previous side. So the first part is to just let your legs roll slowly rightward, not all the way down, just enough to feel your left foot now pivot, lift away from the floor, and then rock to center. How does it feel to bring more and more weight towards the longitudinal arch side of the right foot, the pinky toe side of the right foot? And when you've got a clear enough sense of how that feels with your knees together, with your inner ankles together, then we could add in the movement through your right arm as well. So as your knees move rightward, bring the right hand to the right side of the belly as the starting point, and then slide your right hand over your abdomen, across the navel to the left, to the outside edge of your left hip, and down the outseam side of your left thigh, maybe towards the left knee, maybe not. And then come back up with the legs, with the pelvis, with the arm across the belly, and back to the right side of the belly. Rinse and repeat. Really important not to force anything with these movements. So whatever you get is what you get. The next time both of your legs are moving rightward and your right hand is somewhere maybe near the outside edge of the right knee, pause there. And then again, let's move the work into the feet and let your right hand just receive the response that's directed upward from there. So the inner border of your feet, if you imagine your 2 feet together as a book, right? Literally what we're doing here is opening the book as if the pages of the book are opening towards the floor, right? The big toe side, the pinky toe side, press down, and then relax to neutral. You try that about 6 to 7 times. Can you feel the inner contraction through the inseams of the thighs? The knees squeeze into each other a little bit more. You're not making it happen. It happens as a result of what your 2 feet are doing down below. And when you're ready, you can simply switch that movement to letting the outer border of your feet press down and let your right hand receive the opening of the knees. Chances are your knees will separate slightly. Doesn't have to be a big move. And now it's almost as if you're trying to close the book of your feet. On your next cycle, when you complete, allow your hand to trace back up and over your abdomen as you roll the knees back to center and slide your legs away from you. Pause and sense and feel into yourself. And now just turn your head easy breezy from side to side, rolling rotation. Roll across the back of your head one direction, roll in the other direction a few times. Does one side feel freer than the other? The next time your head naturally comes back to center, whole center, and Now find your hip bones, the top of where we often think of the hips as being, right? The hip bone. And then what I'm going to invite you to do with the index and second finger perhaps and your thumb around the back is it's easy to find the hip bones with that arrangement, right? But to find the hip joint, it's a little harder. So you might have to change the placement of the fingers or how we're using our hands. You can do this any way that feels comfortable for you. But the hip joint is literally where your leg and your hip meet when you sit, for example. So let's just choose a leg and we'll find the hip joint. So let's start with your left leg. Choose your left leg, bend your left leg at the knee and bring your left leg up. Do you feel that spot where your leg is bending? That's your hip joint. Bring your finger down to that spot where you feel that deep bend and the crevice of your leg joining your pelvis. That's the hip joint. Now, keep your left foot flat and pointing straight up to the ceiling for this last exercise. And your other hand can stay either on the hip bone up high, while your other hand, your left hand in this case, is down on the hip joint. Or if you want to move your right hand down to the hip joint as well, you certainly can. It's totally up to you. You're going to get feedback, in other words, from your fingers here. You're going to get feedback. So working again with dorsiflexion, plantar flexion, slightly lift your left toes, just a little bit, doesn't take much, a couple of inches, and then turn, keeping your left heel on the floor, turn your left toes inward and notice what you feel in your left hand. And then turn your left toes back to center and relax the left toes down. The movement's really, really small. Try that about 5 to 6 more times. What do you notice? What do you feel? Not only in your left hand and the hip, but down in the top of your shin, down in the top of your foot, in your inner ankle, in the back of your calf. Remember to relax your foot back to the floor when you turn it to center so that you turn the muscles off. A stuck muscle in the on position can't deliver you its fullest potential. Okay? Now, everything has an equal and opposite to it. So let's try it in the other. Well, actually, let's do one more variation, right? Let's just do one round of another variation. So we'll turn in again, but this time pick your left toes up, curl your toes towards the arch of your foot, and then turn them in. That will make the action even more interesting, I would imagine. You'll feel more contraction if you lift your left toes, curl your left toes strongly towards the sole of the foot, and then turn your foot inward. And then turn out and free your toes. This, by the way, is the sequence I'm borrowing from Colm McDonald in Dublin. Let's try the opposite orientation, which is just to lift your toes again on the left foot and then turn out with your foot away from the center line of your body. And then turn back to midline or back to neutral. And again, relax the foot to the floor. Take the dorsiflexion out of it. Try that about 5 or 6 more times. Can you feel these movements having an impact way up high with your left hand? Great. Whatever you've gotten, go ahead and slide your left leg straight. Take a well-deserved rest. With your left leg long next to your right leg, notice how does the left foot, ankle, calf, knee, thigh, hip, lower back feel compared to the right side, which we have not yet done. And then let's give it a whirl on the right side. So when you're ready, bend your right leg at the knee. Find the hand placement for you that feels like it would make sense and be a way for you to trick and track the movements with your fingers, with the palms of your hands. And we'll start the same way. So lift your right foot slightly away from the floor. Direct your right toes to the midline, turn in. Your shin will roll in a little bit as well. And then roll out with your toes and release the top of your foot flat to the floor. Rinse and repeat. If hips tend to be a trouble spot for you, my suspicion is that usually we're working the big muscles first. Sometimes it can be incredibly useful to let the big muscles have a day off. And these smaller movements done down far away from the hip can be incredibly helpful for working with the hips, but in a more nuanced way. If you haven't yet already given a whirl, try the dorsiflexion of the foot and then the curling of the toes as you turn your foot in. Curl the toes strongly towards the arch of the foot, like you're trying to hold balloon strings between all of your toes, right? Turn the foot in, holding those balloons firm. And notice how that feels compared to the first version. Turn out, release the balloons, release, open the space between the toes, and then relax the top of the foot flat. Final variation is to turn from the shin, turn from the foot, I should say, out to the side. So same process. Lift a little bit with the top of the foot away from the floor. Turn from your heel so that your toes move out to the side. and then come back to center. Release the foot down and center as a reset. And try that movement about 5 or 6 more times. The next time you find your right toes turning back to center, open the back of your right knee, allow your right leg to straighten and rest. Take another few moments, and when you're ready, you can begin to make your departure from this place a reality. Imagine that anything you discovered in your body that you want to bring back as trophies, as souvenirs, you could bring it back.